All right, so just quick little reminders here. When came in, you picked up the little checklist, which we're going to talk about here for a little bit. This is for your rough draft. If you didn't get it, it's over there on the little table. We'll walk the chain again. All the people we need. We'll talk about that checklist here in a little bit. We're also going to specifically look at prompt number 1. Remember, that's in your course syllabus, page 6, so you probably want to take that out and have a look at it. And essentially, we're going to start taking a look at concerns that you might have about that prompt and better ways to attack it. A couple reminders that would be going out. You know that tomorrow you have a quiz for Chapter 5. Remember, it's only Chapter 5. It's multiple choice. It's 20 questions. You can bring in handwritten notes for it. You just can't print something out. Someone, I think it was in later in the day, said, well, what if I rewrite the whole chapter? You got 10 minutes, so you can't really read a whole chapter and answer all the questions in probably those 10 minutes. It helps you memorize it. I guess you can do it a little bit more if you want, but that's probably not the best way to go about it. Different people take notes different ways. I think probably for me, usually what I would do if I'm doing something along these lines is I do that double entry thing. So I just write down things on a page that seem to kind of jump out, whether it be Darby was talking about, similes and metaphors. There's some statistics that get thrown out there when it comes to acreage. The guy talks about what's on his sandwich and all that kind of stuff as the kids are looking at him and all those things. So little details that jump out to you, significant. For me, I quote them and then I just kind of reflect on them so it stays in my mind a little bit longer. But different people certainly have different ways when it comes to that. But handwritten notes you can use on quiz tomorrow, just not printing out stuff from, Schmoop and GradeSaver and Spark Notes and all that stuff. For Monday, remember Google Classroom, sign up. If you're running any issues, let me know. Emma tried to sign on with the new Gmail that you have. You could get into Gmail, but you couldn't sign into Google Classroom, so you're still going NS19 at this point. I bet there'll be a day later on in the next week or so when we all switch it over to the new Gmail, but we'll just wait for that to happen whenever it does. All right. For your rough draft that we're going to start talking about, we briefly mentioned that, turnitin.com is what we use for final copies and all that kind of stuff. Since you are going to have a rough draft for Thursday of next week, I do want that one to be a paper copy. Now, again, you're in here in homeroom, so I can give you a pass and go down to the library if you do need to print it out. But when we do a peer editing, I think it's better to look at it on paper and be able to mark it, highlight some stuff, as opposed to screen. So normally you only do a digital copy, but for Thursday of next week, do bring in a paper copy. If that's going to be an issue or something, let me know. Keep me in the loop and be able to help you out with that. All right? Any questions about that kind of stuff? One thing that I did, a couple things that I added to Google Classroom yesterday. The recorded lesson thing is up and running, so if you want to relive yesterday's wonderful moments, although it looks like I need to add it, you'll be able to do that. But I did put in the assignment here for Grapes of Wrath prompt number 1. What I also attached to it was an MLA template. So, and I assigned one to each of you. So within your Google Drive, once you go into the Google Classroom, it'll say MLA template, and then I think it'll just put your name kind of next to it. So Darby will have her own, Ashley will have her own. I set it up so that number 1, you don't mess up anything so far as your formatting. It's already double spaced, lets you know, put in your last name. I got the page numbers going. I believe I even put in a works cited page so that you wouldn't forget about that. You don't have to use this template that I set up, but I do think a benefit of doing so would be Darby's typing her essay. She runs into an issue Tuesday night next week. Rather than her having to share a copy with me or copy and paste a paragraph and ask how this is working, I already have access to it because once you start working on it, it gives me basically, it has shared the document with me. So I think it would be a good way, number 1, make sure you don't mess up MLA format, but it also kind of keeps me in the loop of what you're doing. Also, if Lana is not here on Thursday, and doesn't bring in your paper copy, I can still check to make sure that it's done, give you the points that you deserve, or you don't have it done, and then I yell at you even though you're not here. And Hannah judges you. But she does that anyway. So when you go to Google Classroom, that link will be right there for you to use. All right. I like the little spinny ball. While we're waiting for that, the checklist that you have, your rough draft is going to go in as a participation assignment in the grade book on next Thursday when we check them in. It's 15 points. So on the checklist, it's basically just a breakdown of what those 15 points are going to look like, how it's going to be set up. Come on, where'd you go? Corey, any technical difficulties fall on your shoulders, meaning I blame you. I don't expect you to do anything about it, but I will blame you for it. Okay, just so we have that understanding. So if you forget to do your works cited page, it's not going to be a surprise to you as to the number of points that we get lost and things like that. Not every essay is going to be a cookie cutter kind of style essay. This one kind of is a little bit in the sense that there's an introduction and conclusion. We're going to go with 3 body paragraphs for it. For your paragraphs, when it comes to evidence, and we'll talk about this today and tomorrow as we're going through things with the essay, when it comes to evidence, for each body paragraph, the expectation is you have at least 2 quoted passages. So you have 2 direct quotes, parenthetical documentation, all that stuff coming from the book. So with 3 body paragraphs, how many are we looking at total? 6. The Honors Algebra 2 people were a little slow with that. Come on, Noel. 3 citations per body paragraph means you should also have an additional detail that would be cited. Doesn't mean you're going to have 3 additional details, but for each body paragraph you would have at least 3 examples that are coming from the book. 2 of those would be direct quotes. If Tyler's worried about messing it up and he wants to have 3 direct quotes for every body paragraph, I'm okay with that. But throughout the course of the whole entire essay, that would give you a grand total of 9 specific examples that would be coming from the book. So, Darby, I'm just going to use you as an example since we were talking about chapter 5. She was mentioning the whole bank monster kind of idea. Certainly that would be, if you write about part of chapter 5, and your essay is covering the book, it's not a chapter 5 essay. That was a question that was coming up yesterday. Whole entire book. She might make reference to the bank being compared to a monster, and you could go page 47 without quoting it specifically, but that's still a very specific detail about it. The tractor driver. Anyone recall how much he gets paid? Okay, you don't have to quote it, but he could still put $3 a day as the payment that the tractor driver receives. I'm making up the page number, page 49. That would be a specific detail. So for it to be quoted, obviously you're going to be taking Steinbeck word for word, but a specific detail that would still get cited is required for each of the body paragraphs. And that's going to be pretty standard that we do throughout the course of the year. We're usually looking for at least 3 specific examples coming from the book. All right, any questions there? Equal support from expository and the narrative chapters, simply meaning if you take everything from chapter 5, number 1, you have a pretty narrow essay because you're only dealing with 10 pages roughly of a 600-page book. But there should be things that are dealing both with the Jodes in the narrative chapters or the story chapters, and then there should also be plenty of detail coming from those little expository chapter 1, chapter 3, chapter 5, chapter 7 type chapters. Now, some mathematicians would be going, wait a minute, you can't do that, because I have to have at least 9 examples coming from the book. Do you want 4.5 from one set of chapters and 4.5 from the other? No, but you could do like a 4 or 5 split. But if you have 2 examples coming from expository chapters and 7 examples coming from narrative chapters, that's not equal enough. Corey wants things to be perfect and equal. You want to have 10 examples, go 5 and 5, be my guest. Not something that you would have to do. But we'd be looking for support both from Jode and then from those other chapters as well. Okay. I love day 2. You just stare. and kind of chuckle, but you're not sure if you're supposed to yet. Works cited page, everyone's going to have at least one book. If you do anything for an attention grabber, you go to history.com, pull up some stuff about Dust Bowl, Great Depression, you would cite that. If you used anything to kind of help you along the way, whether it be a Schmoop or a Spark Notes, you would cite that as well. But certainly everyone would have at least one works cited with the book itself on the page. All right. So you do all of those things, it's 15 points. Keep in mind, this is a rough draft score. If you get a 15 out of 15 on the rough draft, in no way am I giving you a pinky promise that you will get 100% on the essay or anything like that. Noel could have a wonderful rough draft so far as the points, could be a terrible essay, and not that you get a 0%, but it might not be exactly the same. Conversely, you might not have all your body paragraphs done, lose a couple points for your quoted passages, get like a 10 out of 15, you turn it up when it comes to the final copy, and you could certainly get a very high score with it. Good, good, good. All right. So, coming from your course syllabus, these are the two prompts that we have. We are only worried about prompt number 1 at this point. So, we're not even worried about number 2. Don't cross out number 2 on your book because you're going to need it later. I can cross it out and always kind of come back. Prompt number 1, reading in a carefully argued essay, analyze at least 3 rhetorical devices, diction, imagery, details, figurative language, and syntax, to name a few, used by Steinbeck to convey his attitude toward the effect or effects of the Dust Bowl on the migrant people. What do we have to do? Say you pretty much have 2 decisions that you have to make so far as writing the essay. Any idea on what either of those 2 would be? Yep, you're going to have to pick rhetorical devices, and I would say of the things, even though that one shows up first in the prompt, it's probably the second thing that you're going to do. But yeah, we're going to have to pick rhetorical devices. Some of us are going, fine. Others are going, I don't know what you mean by those things, and we'll take care of that here in a little bit. So one thing is going to be picking rhetorical devices. The other thing, yep, we got to come up with what Steinbeck's attitude is. Now keep in mind, there are certainly multiple possibilities that they could be for his attitude. I am not looking for all of you to agree on one attitude and write that. That would be really boring for me. I like having a little bit of variety, not having the same essay coming over and over and over. And there are certainly multiple things that he would throw out there. Some, I think a lot of them people would look at as being quite negative, and you could make an argument that some of those things would be positive. So knowing that we got 2 tasks in front of us, one picking an attitude, and the second one coming up with rhetorical devices that he uses to convey that attitude, let's go in the proper order and try to figure out what is his overall attitude. This is the brainstorming part. So what are some possibilities that you would say, not just chapter 5, but you can think about chapter 5 for part of it since you're rereading that, but throughout the course of the book, what seems to be some attitudes he has about the effects of the Dust Bowl on migrant people. We had occupied on that there for a moment.
So in chapter 5, you had a
Scornful? Okay. Remember one of those dead words was like bad? Scornful is much better. Scornful toward who or what?
the bank and
Okay, so toward the bank. I think we could probably come up with some other entities that he would be scornful against as well. Anybody have any that they want to add on to besides just the bank? Pardon? Companies? Police officers? Machines? That truck tried to take out that turtle. Can't do that to a little animal. Stupid machine. What else can I extend? Like landowners and things like that? Okay. Corey, what's the first thing we got to do? What's the first thing we got to do? What's the second thing? Yeah. So how many body paragraphs are we writing about? Easier or harder in your mind to write about 2 or 3 different entities that he would be scornful against? Or would we be better off having like one entity? What would help you stay consistent, focused throughout? Different things for different people, but probably picking one. Now, let's say police officers, gets chosen, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with any of these things. Can you make a full essay about solely the police officers? I don't know. It probably could be done, but it might be a little tricky. I think the same thing is going to happen with the landowners, with the bank, with the companies, machines, all of those things. Can you think of a term, an entity that would like encompass, if not all, at least most of those things? Could go that way. And probably landowners and bank companies, more so than that capitalistic police officer. But yeah, that would certainly work for some. Anything else? Okay. I mean, the Jodes are an agricultural group. A lot of people are, farming, and now this whole new world is coming in, especially with machines. Tractor driver gets compared to a robot with the goggles and gloves and all that kind of stuff that he has. We didn't put this term up there. Capitalism, we kind of associate with economics, but also a little bit with what big G word? Government. Government, bank, police officers, kind of thinking of an A term. Yeah, it could go like authority. So if you went with, and any of these 3 would be perfectly fine. If you went with one of those, that gives you a little bit more flexibility where you could go that Steinbeck is conveying his scornful attitude towards authority. Then maybe in one of those body paragraphs, a little bit more emphasis is placed on the police officers. Maybe in another body paragraph, a little bit more emphasis is placed on the landowners and the bank and something like that. But going with the term authority, it's still specific enough, but it gives you a little bit of flexibility that you can incorporate different things. There's absolutely, again, nothing wrong with writing about his scornful attitude towards machines, but you have to make sure then all of your examples tie into his scornful attitude specifically toward machines. That might be a little bit of a struggle in some cases for some people. All right. So we got scornful attitude. What else do we have? Why can't I extend the page? Corey, I'm having technical difficulties again. You know what this means. Oh well, we'll keep going on. What else besides just scornful? Hopeful? Did you read the book? A lot of bad stuff's going on. Okay. I agree. Hopeful would work. Hopeful about what? Okay. New life, new beginnings. Then reality sets in. Some of you people came in yesterday hopeful. Then you went to A-push. You haven't done a DPQ yet. Just wait. What else? Anything else hopeful about? We kind of ran into a brick wall. Hey, Corey, let's talk about the end of the book. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Rosa Sharon? And give me your deep thoughts.
I was a little caught off guard by it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just not something I'd expect.
Mm-hmm. I think you're trying to avoid this conversation a little bit. You gonna talk about Rosa Sharon in the end of the book?
Well, I can, but I was just gonna say, well, for Hopeful, I was gonna talk about, like how her and Connie were like, Hopeful, like excited to start a family,
Mm-hmm.
and
He's gonna work on radios, live in the city,
yeah.
in Moscow, and you stupid little child, without really saying that.
Do you want me to talk about the end?
Do you want to talk about the end of the book?
Well, I think that I was talking like with someone on the bus about it, and we kind of agreed.
What a great way to start your day.
Symbolize like well, how like we didn't think it was like that weird. Like it's like a strange thing, but we both think that it symbolizes like the family, like like I don't know how to explain it. Even though her baby died, they kind of like came together as a family. Even though she didn't know this guy, it was like they're all a part of like a bigger, like they all just stick together.
Okay. Alyssa, did you have something else?
Like it kind of feels like the poor people that humanity will prevail.
Okay. So family, humanity. When it's all said and done, what does she essentially do for the guy at the end? Saves him. Saves his life. And some folks might argue, depending on your take of Rose of Sharon, that there's a little bit of irony with that, or Rose of Sharon, if we're going to go with like Jode speak. I don't know what your take is. I think she's annoying. We're getting agreement over there. Okay. Now you could go, she's young, she's impressionable, she's been kind of fooled by Connie a little bit before Connie runs away and all that kind of stuff. But if Rose of Sharon, of all people, can like save a person's life and take a moment that has just occurred to her, which is probably, in just about anyone, if we're in that situation, bottom point of their life, worst emotional state, and be able to still save someone, boy, that says a lot about the chance that there could have for humanity that maybe we're not all going to be bad, terrible people. What does Ma essentially say, in paraphrasing? If you're going to depend on anybody, who do you depend upon? There could be a couple answers for this one. Could be the poor people. Certainly could be family, because she's like the matriarch, but certainly kind of, even becomes further head of the family. That there is hope for humanity and people coming together no matter what. So even in adverse situations like this, still remain hopeful that, hey, something positive could come out of it. I believe it's chapter 14. Steinbeck makes a big, it's expository chapter, philosophical chapter, makes a big deal about pronouns. And there's two pronouns that he talks about, and that there is a switch that if you are going to essentially be able to survive, you have to go from one pronoun to the other pronoun. You go from I to we. What does that essentially argue? Sure. And I think even the term of family can start to change, where it doesn't mean you have to be blood relatives. You don't have to live in the same house to be a family. Maybe family might not be the word that necessarily you want to use. If you have groups of people coming together that live peacefully, usually we call like a community would be taking place. You certainly see that early on. Jodes and the Wilsons. You see that in the Hoovervilles. You see that in a lot of places where people are coming together to benefit, to help out one another. Certainly, you're still going to have situations where people are unable to make that change, where they stay with the I, but if there is going to be success, Steinbeck argues, you have to kind of turn into a we. Now, from a political standpoint, this gets a little controversial, because if he's being scornful towards capitalism, what's the argument then that people would say Steinbeck's getting a little bit more socialist here, and that can be a little tricky, in the U.S. post 1920s when you had a Red Scare going into World War II, even though it hasn't quite started yet. But there certainly could be a little bit of a socialist view taking place. And Steinbeck doesn't mind being a boat rocker, at all. You folks read The Pearl. I'm sorry. That was a rough one. For those of you who liked it, I don't know what you read, but what do you think, Corey?
You don't like
What do you think of A Separate Peace? That's the worst book ever published.
No.
Allie's going no.
I think Grace
It
Ross
was
the worst
good
one ever
until the
published.
end.
No, it was good when I finished and never read it again. Actually, I didn't even finish. What can I say?
No,
Hey,
Grace-
he peed out of the boat.
Grace, worst.
That was at least entertaining. So there's some hopefulness that could be taking place for new life, family, humanity, community, the idea of people actually coming together. One of the chapters, Al and May, they have their roadside diner where family comes in looking for bread and they can't, change. She doesn't want to sell it, and Al's going to sell it, and all that kind of stuff. What does May eventually end up doing for the family?
She sells the kids nickel candy.
Okay, so she does the penny candy, get a little bit of bread just to kind of get them out. What does the truck driver do at the very end of that chapter? Anyone remember that detail? He leaves a large tip. And the idea behind it would be, what is he doing through the larger tip? Compensating for the loss of money that happened with the family coming in. So even though he doesn't, and how much he really even knows Al and May could be a little bit questioned, he certainly doesn't know the family that's coming in, but he is still doing something that is going to help out the greater we. There's still a sense of community. So there certainly is some hopefulness that would be going throughout the course of the book. You could argue that, and I wouldn't have a problem with it whatsoever. Okay. What else?
What chapter was that?
Al and May. 15's in my head.
Oh yeah, it was 15.
Also has the sign in it that nobody knows what it means. Yep. They're confused. That's okay.
If I tell you, will you buy another drink? That's what all those letters
So you go up to the bar, you're sitting there, hey, what's that sign mean? If I tell you, will you buy me another drink? Sure. And then you just, But you can't do that. Unless it's a milkshake. Any other attitudes?
Desolation.
How can we turn that into attitude? Like you can, the environment, there's desolation or things have been. Are you kind of going in the
Like,
anti-hopeful?
yeah.
Okay. This would be fun. I read a hopeful essay, then I get Corey's, the world is coming to an end, there is no hope ever. Just want to say loss of hope for now? Okay. How come?
Everyone, at the beginning of their journey, west, they started to lose hope. Everyone was getting really hungry. You had death in the family.
All right, so we got starvation. We have death. What does Connie do? What does Noah do? Whether we want to argue abandon for, but certainly leaving. Noah left by the water. That had to happen. Abandonment. Anything else?
I think that Rose of Sharon's baby kind of symbolized her, so whatever she wants.
And, well,
going along with that,
Okay, and so you certainly, and this could be tricky, and I don't know if I would do it for my first essay quite yet. Some of you might want to, where you could start off with there is a loss of hope, but it kind of starts to change and maybe twist by the end. I purposely left the prompt a little open-ended, where Steinbeck to convey his attitude toward the effect or effects of the Dust Bowl. So you could take a look at multiple effects if you want. I probably wouldn't. Just for simplicity's sake, first essay, you don't know what I'm going to do when it comes to grading them, looking at them yet, and all that kind of stuff. You're still trying to, tread water. I'd probably go with one. But if you felt strong enough, and certainly, some of you may, you could take a look at kind of multiple effects where it could kind of start off with Corey's, the world is going to come to an end, and it might kind of change a little bit by the time Ellie gets to the end of her essay. So that certainly would be a possibility out there that in some ways there could kind of be like a combination between the two. That's ultimately going to be your call for it, all right? But the hope would be, since we have to use that word, that, and you're not limited to what these attitudes have been, but you can at least recognize there's possibilities for various attitudes out there. You could be taking a look at government. Some of you are very strong when it comes to political ideas and the whole capitalism versus socialist idea. Ooh, this is in my wheelhouse. I want to write about it. Others of you are going, I'm not going anywhere near that. I'll just write about some other stuff. That's certainly your choice. But the hope is that you can at least see there are some options out there, and we're coming up with, even though these aren't like specific things, simply saying starvation, death, and abandonment, but you can come up with specific examples to back those things up. At least okay with that, so far as ideas. So I think coming up with option number one, what are some possible attitudes, and it's not limited to those three, or at least okay. The rhetorical device is, that's the second part that we have to try to figure out. How many body paragraphs? Everyone's like 3 now. So how many rhetorical devices? 3. All right. What are rhetorical devices? Okay.
Well, I mean, like, I know they're like, I mean, example of like diction, figurative language, and syntactic permutation are like the ones that I wrote down for.
Syntactic permutation. I like that
Well,
one.
I wasn't sure whether I was going to ask you that, but like, I'm not sure. They're just techniques that we're used to.
Diddles. Say it. Diddles. It's fun to say. It's an acronym. We'll use it a lot. You want to write diddles down vertically. Give yourself a little bit of space in between them. Anytime you see rhetorical devices, diddles will be the first thing that will come into your mind. Diddles doesn't cover all rhetorical devices, but it's like the starting point for it, especially when it's August and September, maybe even October, and then we'll kind of add to it a little bit, and syntactic permutation can even kind of fit in this. It'll work out. It's an acronym. Anyone want to take any guesses what any of the words stand for? Or letters stand for?
Diction.
Diction's one.
Imagery. The last one, symbolism.
Not symbolism. Details. Some of you are figuring out now, if you look at the prompt, they're actually all listed right there. The S is not symbolism, but it's syntax. The L's kind of cheating a little bit. It's actually figurative language, but didfist doesn't sound as fun as diddles. Now, figurative language is a very broad spectrum. So within figurative language, a lot of things such as symbolism, metaphor, personification, simile, so on and so forth could fit within those things. When we use the term diction, what are we talking about? Simplest form, what is diction? Diction is an author's word choice. And I'm going to add the term individual word choice, because sometimes folks will get a little confused between the differences between diction and syntax. Syntax, you're taking a look at sentence structure. Diction, you're looking at the use of individual terms. What was the question most of us got when we got home yesterday? How was your first day at school? And most of you went like this. Those of you who like actually said something, you said okay. Some might have said not bad, but in your head you were going bad. Corey got home and said desolation.
I got home and fell asleep.
That's some strong word choice. If I were to say, how was your first day of school? Not great. How was your first day of school? Desolation. Grammatically, that's weird. But what are we taking from Corey's statement? It was a really bad day. So that use of word choice, individual word choice, it packed a little bit more punch behind it. So as specific words get used where the connotation really is significant, you're taking a look at diction. Imagery, I think we're okay with. Imagery appeals to any of the five. We tend to focus on visual, but it could be smell, taste, touch, hearing, but any kind of sensory words.
What if you say also
Like the dialect. We finished writing appeal to the senses here. Not quite. That when you start getting into dialect and vernacular, you're doing more of the sentence structure with it, or the whole collection of it. If you were to focus on how the term Okies gets used, or there's a lot of animalistic, like dehumanization words that are getting used towards the Okies and the migrants, that's going to be more the diction. If you were to use syntax, you could take a look at the vernacular. The one thing that we're going to have to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about this more so tomorrow, is you want to make sure that you're able to explain how the diction, how the imagery, how the syntax, how the whatever supports the attitude that you're coming up with. I think a lot of times folks will go, I'm going to look at the dialect or the vernacular that's there, but then they have a tough time kind of making that connection as to, well, how does the way that the Jodes actually speak reinforce political viewpoints and all that kind of stuff. But for your original question, I'd go more syntax with it. Any idea for details? Facts, like specific facts. Acreage, wages. They don't have to be numbers, but specific facts. Can you see over the podium? And then figurative language could be a whole host of stuff that we could have going on. You could have simile, metaphor, symbolism, irony. You could have allusions going on in here, hyperbole, whatever the case may be. Ultimately, you're going to choose 3 of these. And how diction, imagery, symbolism will help support one of Steinbeck's attitudes. And after we take your quiz tomorrow, I'll show you how we're going to kind of set up your thesis and how the body paragraphs will then kind of start to formulate from it.
If you pick figurative language, so just pick like one.
I'm glad you read my mind with that one, because you cannot pick figurative language, simply being because it's too broad of a term. Now, I have no problem if you pick metaphor, or if you pick simile, or you pick allusions. Your whole essay could be on figurative language. You could have one body paragraph where you're taking a look at allusions. You could have a paragraph where you're looking at irony. You could have a paragraph where you're looking at symbolism. That would be okay. But you would not have all 3 of those things going on in one paragraph. It's just too loose of an argument at that point. So the first decision that you really want to make is, what do I think that overall attitude is? Then, okay, which devices really support that the attitude that you select? There's probably really even a middle step that you would do. Pick the argument, find the examples in the book that really support that argument, and then which literary devices really kind of support that. But tomorrow and even Monday, we're going to talk about this more so that you get a better idea.